and welcome back to another episode of the Zero Empty Spaces podcast, episode 57, with Boca Raton Innovation Campus resident artist Silvia Arias from her beautiful space here at The Brick. If you didn't know about Zero Empty Spaces, myself, Evan Snow, and my business partner, Mr. Andrew Martineau, as arts advocates, community builders, and placemakers, started an initiative to activate vacant commercial real estate spaces so talented artists like her can have space to create and collaborate affordably outside their home. It's led to a myriad of win-win-win benefits with the first 31 spaces that we've activated now in the last 5 years across 4 states. So to find out more about the program, you can log on to zeroemptyspaces.com. One of the podcasts is to connect you with the talented artists like her to make the program what it is. So without much further ado, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself at a high level and how you got started in the arts?
Okay, well, I'm Silvia Arias. I've always liked creating since I was little. And I would get into a little bit of trouble at school because, if there was homework that required drawing of some sort, that's what I would start with. And it would take my entire time. And then I would not have enough time to do the rest of the homework. So I was always involved in doing some artwork. My dad always encouraged me to draw. I always loved animals, and I wanted to actually be a veterinarian. And I went to a university. I went to Adelphi University in New York, and I was working on my pre-veterinarian degree. So I have a biology degree, BS, and I did a minor in art. So while I was working on that, I realized that I really, really liked art. And I tried working I did work with a veterinarian in Peru, because I'm Peruvian, in Peru and here in New York, actually. And I eventually realized that it was not for me. So then I said, I'm going to go to what I really wanted to do, which was art. So I applied for a master's degree. I got into the master's program, and I worked through my master's in the school. While I was doing that, I was trying to figure out what it is that I wanted to do within art. So my professors were telling me, Silvia, you really need to teach. You're really good. You should, we need artists to teach, not teachers that will learn to teach art, but artists that can actually teach. So they were encouraging me to do that. And I said, I will never, ever, I will never teach. So during this process, I was actually thinking maybe I can do scientific illustration. So my professor, my anthropology professor, Noti, Professor Agelarakis, he's Greek, he was working with the first agriculturalists of Baghdad.
Oh, wow.
And so he trusted me so much. He brought me skulls, like he brought me a skull, and I would have to illustrate it for his publishings and bones. And I mean, he said, be very careful because, you have history in your hands. So, but the detail that I needed to work in was so intense. And if I were to go just like not even a millimeter out, he would say, we need to fix that because then that is not the wound that this person died from, blah, blah, blah. So anyways, so I said, I don't like that restriction. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to teach. I'm just going to do my art. So I loved expressing my emotions into canvas. I did not know at the moment what I was painting or why I was painting what I was painting, but I did a lot of self-portraits. And when I was doing self-portraits, I did not know a lot of artists, just the traditional, Van Gogh and Monet and the Renaissance. So my professor said, you're our Frida Kahlo. And I'm like, who's Frida Kahlo? So then I started learning about Frida Kahlo. But prior to that, I was doing photography also. So they photography teacher said, "You are our Cindy Sherman." I'm like, "Who's Cindy Sherman?" And I started looking. Actually, I take it back. It was um, Professor Chemetsky, who I'm still in contact with.
Nice.
Um, and he was my art history professor. So he told me about Cindy Sherman, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, Cindy Sherman!" And that's how I learned about Cindy Sherman.
Nice.
So those were influences that I had uh, while I was learning and I was in school.
Interesting. And it's interesting. Like one thing leads to another thing, leads to another thing. You never
Mm-hmm.
know what's going to be kind of behind that door. So from that like early exposure and dabbling, um, how have you developed into an artist since then?
Well, it's been a long road. I had, as luck would have it, or life would have it, I needed work. And it was very hard for me to make ends meet as an artist. So I started teaching. I said, I'm never going to teach. And I started teaching at a private school in the Upper East Side in Manhattan. And I had no training. So I was very lucky that uh, the school was open and they were open to having an artist work in the school.
Nice.
So it was a great experience. I learned a lot. I learned what to do as a teacher. I learned what not to do as a teacher. And I loved it. And then I was done with the winters in New York. And I said, what can I do to keep teaching, but be closer to Peru? How far south can I go? So Florida was the next, the closest thing to Peru. So I came to Florida and I continued. I found a wonderful school here, Pinecrest School. I worked there for many years. Um, and again, they were very happy to have an artist to work at the school.
Nice.
So, um, and the school let me do what I wanted to do. And I couldn't do much of my artwork, but I was doing artwork through my students. So I did installations, I did a whole bunch of stuff there. Eventually, it was time for me to go. And I left and I said, I need to go back to doing my artwork. And that's what I did. Now, and it just so happens that you know how things just fall into place. It was just things coming together. I started painting my shoes because it was small and I could do it in my dining room table. And then there were canvas, so it was kind of like painting on a canvas. And then the calling to go back to canvas was big. So, and I found zero empty spaces. I was just happened to be at the right place at the right time.
During the Palm Beach Cultural Council Open Studios?
Yes.
That's
yes.
when you came?
Yes, I came and I was like, oh, wow, they have this beautiful building here. I did not know. And I came in here and I was like, this is an amazing space.
And the way that your luck has it, this location traditionally runs full with the waiting list. And fortunately, you made an impression on me because we connected. I came that day, we met.
Yeah.
And then when somebody, gave notice, because people, it's month to month, so people leave or they go up north for the summer. I think it was actually somebody that went up north for the summer, made a space available, and you didn't have to wait that long to get in, which was great. And that, everything happens for a reason, the bad and the good. And we're so glad to have you. And, you've
Thank
already
you.
become obviously part of the art community here at the Boca Raton Innovation Campus at our Zero Empty Space location. But, you joined our Choose 954 artist potluck last weekend at our Gulfstream Park space in Hondale. Mm-hmm. Participated in some of the workshops with Sergio Gomez and Datu
Yes.
Nina Gomez at Art Next Level. And we're so glad to be able to provide support for artists like yourself of any level, emerging, mid-career, established, or otherwise, that are looking for a space to create and collaborate outside their home, because you're quite talented. Obviously, you've had a wealth of experience. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about your current work and style and kind of what you're working on and what you want your work to reflect to the viewer and potential consumer.
I started painting trees. I would think about maybe over 10 years ago. Started working little small things here and there. Um, I've had a connection with nature through uh, my dad. My dad was an engineer in agronomy, and he had a farm in Peru. My brother now runs the farm. He exports his fruits around the world. Um, and I was exposed to that as a kid. I went to my family is a mining family in Peru, and my vacations were going to the mining site, and we were like in the almost like in the jungle. So I remember enjoying being outdoors and being in touch with nature always. Um, so I think there's a connection and a respect for nature that comes from that and my dad. And so it, my artwork right now is reflecting um, the human condition, how resilient we can be. Um, I mean, who hasn't just looked, especially here in Florida? There's so many trees that are all over, and you just don't look at them. I look at a tree. That tree particularly. I've been looking at that tree for I don't know, quite a few weeks. And it's like, the more I look at it, the more I'm like, oh my gosh, this is such an amazing tree. The texture, the twists and turns, the dips, the branches, so it's, it reflects, I think, our resilience condition and how we can actually learn from nature and how trees communicate via the root systems and all of this amazing things that we're learning that trees are capable. I mean, they're the lungs of the planet. You know, they're the cliche that it represents life, but
It does.
It's it's I have much respect and it hurts actually when I see that trees that are sometimes in a parking lot, like all of a sudden I go back in the Publix that I shop and they chopped all the trees and I'm like, why? Why did they do that? They were perfectly fine trees. There's nothing wrong with them. They just wanted something new. I don't know. So it really affects me. It hurts me when I see that. Um, so, and I'm painting trees without leaves because it shows the vulnerability of a tree. You see the entire structure. There's nothing you can hide. A tree with leaves, it's beautiful. It gives you shade. It's kind of dressed. But right now, it's naked. It's a naked tree. So you can't hide anything. It's like you are completely exposed.
Interesting. And what was one of the impetuses, or what was one of the moments that came to you that led you to putting the trees to the canvas?
Um, can I share that story I
You
told
can
you?
share whatever you'd like to share.
Okay. Well, I was doing meditation for a while, then I found myself doing regressions. And in one regression that I did, I had, I was a being which was completely connected with nature. I was one with nature, like my arms, my finger, I was just in it. And when I came out of that regression, I felt a sense of heightened awareness. And I could hear the plants. I could hear, I mean, this is really like, woo, out there. But I think, anyways, and they were changing the hedges on a community as I was making a right turn, and they had taken the ficus out, and the ficus were laying down with trees, the roots exposed. And I could hear the cry for help from all of these trees, all of these bushes, like they're they're dead, they're dying. They're not dead, they were dying at the moment. And it just affected me really, really deeply. It was a profound connection that I had at that moment. And it was, I think, at that moment that I felt even more of a connection and a respect for, for plants. They always tell you, oh, talk to your plant, if you have plants at home, water it, talk to it, and, it'll grow. And I think, I haven't tried it, but I think, it does affect the plant at some point. I mean, it's the same thing as when you talk to somebody. You can talk to somebody in a beautiful way, uplifting that person, or you can do the opposite. So I want to do the uplifting. I want to do the positive. I want to do the beautiful things.
No, that's great. I mean, and to further the connection with nature, further connection with plants, inspire people to maybe be a little bit more mindful about the trees and their environment, and or nature. No worries. Speaking of inspiration, who are some of your inspirations that have inspired your artwork and your creative outlet?
Frida Kahlo, Cindy Sherman. I mean, I've seen, I was just recently in Portugal, and I went to the Gulbenkian Museum, and just everything you see there is inspiring. There's so many artists. And again, my professor Chemetsky was a very important professor that I had, that he taught me, and I appreciated art even more so. And traveling and looking at the Vatican Museum and looking at Matisse. I mean, and then in Florence, I can't remember now. I'm trying to spit a lot of information out and I'm not processing it. But I would look at artwork and I would just weep, because this is artwork that I've seen in books that Professor Chemetsky, Peter, taught me, and I can finally get to see. And that artwork was touched by an artist who was a master, 500, 600 years ago. And just looking at that, it has such an impact. So it's not just one particular artist, but there's like a whole bunch of artists. Even just looking around here, you look at things and you're like, artwork, little intimate things, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is like, there's such a connection right there. So there's a lot of
It's one thing to see the artwork in a book, history book, art book, right, and then to be in Europe and to see it in person and know, right, and especially the Vatican. And I'm not religious, and I wasn't raised Catholic or Christian, but that was probably one of the most awe-inspiring moments of my life, was going to the Vatican. One of the most mind-blowing, because they have the largest collection of art with all the sculptures, and even they had some Dali paintings that aren't even at the Dali Museum. Some of his best work, which is crazy. Yeah. So I appreciate you sharing that. I'd like to share a little bit more of your work in your studio. So I'm going to take the camera, we'll spin it around, we'll show them a little bit about your process here.
Perfect.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your process in your studio here?
So first I start with a background. In this case it's red. I could be a different color, but I start with a background, and I'm constantly looking at trees. So I have a lot of trees for reference. I have some up here. And then I do a sketch on the background. And then I start adding light behind the tree. Eventually, I start adding details inside the tree to create this gnarled effect. There's a lot of detail. I use a very thin brush to do the lines. And I'm adding interference. Interference can give you, it depends on which color you use. I'm using interference gold. For this, the the three sisters, I'm calling those three. They're not completed, but they're getting there. I also add detail on the here on the side of the frame, and I find spirals something that I'm drawn to. So, spirals in the universe. We have spirals in our fingers, our prints. So it's something that I'm constantly drawn to.
Very nice. If they'd like to see more of your work on your social media, where can they find you?
They can find me in Facebook and in Instagram under Silvia Arias Art.
Okay. And the last question that we always like to end with here on the Zero Empty Spaces podcast, what do you like the most about having a studio to create in outside your home?
Oh, I am not isolated. At home, I'm isolated. And there is always an interruption. Oh, I got to pay a bill. Oh, I got to cook. Oh, I got to do this. Here, it's just my time. There's no interruptions. And there are artists here that I can actually talk, connect with. If I have a problem, like, hey, how do you deal with this? Or there's always that interaction uh, among the artists. So I find that extremely valuable.
That's great.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
We're glad to have you. You're a ray of sunshine here in the studio. If you'd like to see her work and about 18 other resident artists' work, the open studios here at the Brick is resuming in September on the first Thursday of the month from 4 to 7 p.m. because this is an office building, so hopefully capture some people as they're leaving. There is a lot of other great events coming up here at the Brick. The Cocoa Market, which is a great event, is coming back in October. And the Brick has a bunch of great stuff coming on. There's a bunch of other teaching artists here as well. Michelle Sherman from I Heard You Can Draw teaches classes. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We're open books. You can reach out at Zero Empty Spaces on social media. Send us an email. Working to hopefully make some more space available here in Boca and Palm Beach County. If you know somebody that has vacant commercial real estate, we'd be glad to do something good with it. And we're just so glad to support talented artists like her and her studio mates here. So we're very grateful to have you. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
And we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you.
Cheers.